Welcome to session 7. I am excited. We are halfway through the first phase of the program. So we have 6 more sessions before we move into phase 2. So hopefully you're getting a lot of benefit out of this. You're gaining some real opportunities to make recovery an easier process than having it be a daily battle. So let's begin our centering. So in this moment, all I'm going to do is I just want to pause. Take a deep breath and be present in this moment. If I've had any stresses in my life, anything happening that is making life difficult, I just let it go for a moment. Just for this moment, I'm going to take a break from whatever those stressors in life are. I'm going to give myself 20 minutes to do this. And then as I return to my life, anything that was a stressor will feel much easier. This is the purpose of my tool. This is why I take my 20 minutes. Anytime life is stressful, can pause, recenter, and whatever I'm addressing will become easier. So I choose to do that now. Create almost a bubble around myself where none of that penetrates, where it's quiet, peaceful. Present. And as I bring myself present, I move into my centering contemplation for today. And for today's possibility process, for today's question, centering question, I want to connect with something that I connected with some time ago as a business owner. And it was a shift for me out of anxiety and into empowerment. So it's a pretty simple shift in just the rephrasing of a question. And so I'd like to use that as our centering practice, contemplation. And so this began with the fact that I started a business with no backing, and really I was depending on that business to sustain me. And I just I was having all this anxiety, worrying about whether or not it would work. And so throughout the day, I would just be burdened with this question: what if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? And the same may be happening for some of the people in this program. And what if it doesn't work? What if I can't achieve breaking my addiction, not just sobriety, but being able to never be an addict again? What if I can't get there? And so that question can be one that burdens us. And so what I realized at one point with my business that turned that question, it was just a slight modification, that question, but it turned it into something that was very empowering for me. And so I would like this contemplation to be about shifting anything in your life that you might be experiencing where you're thinking, what if it won't work? And instead, contemplating the question, what do I need to do to make it work? This is a whole different position. I am no longer giving power to the thing to work or not work. I am now saying, what do I need to do to make it work? What, what, where do I have power? Where can I take action? And so this is a great contemplation question. So again, if you're using the centering practices as a practice one day and the take-home tools as a practice another day, I'm going to go ahead and let you know that this is the place where you can pause the video and go into that question. The centering question will be listed in your practices, and that question again is, what do I need to do to make it work? This can be a contemplation. That answer may not come immediately, but it will come, because we're going to be in that centering practice of contemplation. If it's not coming, again, remember to just pause, take that breath, fill the space around you still for a moment, and then sit in it. What do I need to do to make it work? What can I do to make it work? And so that will be the centering practice. Again, if you want to pause the video here, I will now move into the take-home tool. So for our take-home tool this week, what I want to do is I'm going to flash back to a free class I offer in my standard business. And I'm just going to give you snippets of that class to go with your take-home tools. So if you've already done the class, you may have seen this if you happen to be involved in my business, but at the end of it, there will be a take-home tool that's not part of that video. So if you want to go ahead and watch that. It's a great reminder if you've seen it already. And if you haven't, this is a good piece. What I'm doing with this piece is bringing together what we've been talking about in the last two sessions. How memory and sensory information combine to cause a chemical trigger in the brain. Whether, again, it's a good trigger, a bad trigger, negative, positive, but these triggers, how they interact with addictive behavior. So we'll be doing this over the next few sessions. It'll really be this opportunity to educate ourselves on what's causing these triggers, how it's working in the brain, and then followed by a tool to help you navigate those triggers. So I'm going to break away here and give you a chance to watch that video clip, and then I'll be back with your take-home tool. Okay, so what we're going to talk about, where we're going to start, is where triggers really begin. Now, this is really important. So when we're talking brain function, what I'm talking about is the result of, let me rephrase that our entire thoughts, feelings, emotion, our perception of ourselves, our perception of the world around us are all byproduct of chemical. And so those chemicals are triggered in the brain. So you have these neurons that hold information. Certain things happen and it triggers the release of a chemical. And this is how we have our result. This is what we're going to be talking about a lot tonight. So we want to talk about how triggers work. So the first thing that is involved in a trigger is sensory information. So this is sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, right? And the brain's base desire in all things is to be safe, to live better, to have more life. That's the drive of all of nature. And so we're being a fundamental part of nature. This is what our brain is doing. So the sensory information, what happens is it combines with memory. Now, memory is stored data from the past. This can be your past, so your life experience. It can be ancestral past. So this can include primal memory. Most people that are afraid of spiders, snakes, fear of the dark, all come from primal memories. If you take any primate that's never seen a snake before in its life and show it a snake, it will freak out, right? This is just encoded in our DNA, but it is encoded as memory. So we have our personal life experience, we have our entire ancestry, and then we all, including all the way back to primal memory, and then we have the current environment. So the brain is storing all this memory as data, right? It combines that memory with sensory information. So basically, if we're talking about a trigger, for example, that's going to trigger me into a fight or flight response. I'll talk more about that. My brain is going to store information that predicated that. So if somebody grabs me by the arm and then attacks me, my brain is going to store being grabbed by the arm because it's going to try and prevent the thing from happening, right? And then what it's going to do is it's going to, when that happens, it's going to release a chemical. So again, we have sensory information that connects with memory, whatever that memory is, good, bad, everything that happens to us, and then a chemical is released. Okay, this is what becomes our sensory triggers. So when we're talking sensory triggers, this is what we're talking about. This is what's driving the entire bus of our brain. So I want to talk about the fact that sensory trigger then combine again releases that chemical. This creates our state of consciousness, which then affects our life experience. So ultimately, this is what I was talking about. Thoughts, feelings, emotion, everything you consider your reality is byproduct of a chemical production. So what we're going to do is break down those chemical productions, break down the effect they have on our life experience, and then talk about ways to be able to control the brain function that releases that chemical. Okay, I hope that video was helpful. Again, we're tying together some pieces here. So I'm hoping you're starting to see the connection between memory or the data stored in our brain and the sensory information coming in. And so what I want you to do this week as you're getting to know this is to play a bit with this sensory information. As we move forward with clips from that class, we will be starting to observe ourselves and notice how these triggers are actually the driving thing, the thing that drives us to our addiction. And so what I want to do for a take-home tool this week is something that ties into that a bit, that gives us an opportunity to see how we can relieve that initial stress. Now, we're not at the point right now where we're curing the addictive patterns. What we're doing right now is finding healthy tools to manage the stress that would typically cause us to drive to our addictive practice. So we're actually in this place where we're finding healthy coping mechanisms. So a lot of you probably already know about that, but I do want to help educate people on the underlying brain function, because as we move into stage 2, as we move into phase 2 of this program, we're going to be doing a lot more advanced stuff, and understanding this underlying brain function and how it's driving our addiction can be critical. So what I would like to do for this take-home tool is some measurements of that. So there are a couple things that tie to that. And we're going to play around again some more with what affects me and what doesn't. But instead of just affecting the sense, we're going to find out how certain behaviors can help affect our triggered states and help calm us. So right now, what we're trying to do is learn how to calm and soothe the body without an addictive substance. So there are a few here I want to talk about. And what the practice will be this week is, the take-home tool this week is to calm stress states. So anytime you're feeling stressed, anytime you're feeling anxious or angry or feeling down and depressed, these things that are our stress responses, we're going to try some practices. And so the first two I want to talk about are typical soothing behaviors for people. The first one is going outside. Now, anytime we step through a door, this is why going into another room, or if you work from home, before going out, I used to go out to like coffee shops for a change of scenery. We talk about, we can't really do that as much right now, which is frustrating, but just getting outside into your yard or moving from one room to another. Changing scenes causes the brain to process. Again, it has a whole new set of sensory data. So if we're working in a room all the time and we find that we get stressed, if we might find that being in one room more than another in our home causes us to have more cravings because of the sensory information around. So you can do things like rearranging furniture, relocating how and where you do things. So even if you're a person that your coping mechanism is another addictive behavior like watching a lot of TV or getting on your computer, just relocate. Just try relocating. And one of the best ways to relocate is to go outside. Now, of course, depending on weather can affect this, but if we can get outside, a few things can happen. So first of all, it's a lot of sensory information, and outside changes constantly. This is why people with social anxiety, going outside isn't good. And I'm going to talk about that. If you have social anxiety, if you have a phobia of outside, this isn't your tool. I'm going to talk about your tool in a minute. But for those of us that getting outside, getting fresh air, or some sun, or even enjoying a good rainstorm, or the beauty of snow in winter if you have it where you are. So anything that's about that sensory impress outside, because outside changes so much, so constantly, that it is a really good new sensory stimuli, right? It's almost a shock to the system to snap it out of it, snap us out of a triggered state. So going outside, another thing is realizing, go out during different times of day. If you don't usually go outside at night, some stargazing might be nice, right? For some people, going for a drive or a walk is a good thing to do, to be able to get out and get that impress. It's just a really strong stimulation for our senses. Since it triggers multiple sensations at once, a complete shift, it's really good for snapping our brain out of that amygdala trigger. Now, for those of you that have anxiety about going outside, I suggest something I call cocooning. Now, cocooning is kind of the opposite of the other. What can be really damaging to one person's sensory information can be really good and soothing for another. Cocooning is about finding a spot in your home, or it might be another location. For some people, some of their worst stress is at home. So we want to acknowledge that. So it's about finding a place and cocooning there. So it could be a chair or your favorite couch, or a place you go to do your meditations. It might be your car. For some people, driving their car somewhere and sitting in their car is a good one, but also remembering to kind of wrap ourselves up. And so it could be a big sweater or a blanket. This is one where we go to a place where we know we feel safe. And this soothes us, because again, those triggers are a subconscious fear response, a subconscious response to threat. Now, we may not feel it exactly like the way we determine fear, but it is a threat response. So cocooning ourselves and finding that one spot that's the spot we go to soothe can be really powerful. And so picking that spot, again, it can still be a spot in nature. It may not be in your house, but it's a spot where you always feel safe. And if ever that spot stops feeling safe, we don't want to feel like we have no place. We want to take that centering question into effect and say, okay, what can I do? What new spot can I find? And we can know that there is always a spot that we can find. Another option is to create one in a meditative practice, a place that you go, you imagine, a place in nature, or a fortress, or some place that's impenetrable in your imagination where you can go and feel peace. I want to talk about one more with this, and that is the concept of water. Water is as humans, water is a primary source of survival. So for people, water can be a comfort. Now, I know there are people out there with phobias of large bodies of water, but there may be a water source that's not a phobia. It can be a warm bath or a shower. It can be standing next to a river or listening to the ocean. There are sound apps with water. But it is, for most people, a soothing thing. There is some level of water, listening to a sound app that's rain or something like that, because we have these deep primal memory. Remember, we talked about primal memory, that water is sustenance. So that's why a lot of us love the sound of rain, because that's our brain saying, oh, my resource, right? If you're descendant of a tribe that lived in a desert, like I live in a desert, I love rain. And that's just that primal survival mechanism that says, oh, it's raining, that means I have a resource. So Again, there are a lot of different ways to interact with water. So this is a good option for people if either cocooning or going outside doesn't work. Usually one of those two will work, but water is another source. Sound apps are a great resource for the sound of water. But also, if you like being near water, having a fountain, a small fountain in your home, or taking time to hand wash dishes, or even just splashing water on your face, something that works for you. Different people, warm showers versus cold showers. There are a lot of ways to interact with water, even drinking water. And so what I want to add is the fact that a little bit of salt can trigger serotonin in our system, which is that rest and digest chemical. This is often why we crave salty foods when we're stressed. But instead of going to salty foods that may have carbs and stuff, you can get a tall glass of water and just put a little bit of salt in a teaspoon. I use Himalayan pink salt because it also has minerals. But just making a little bit of salt water and drinking it will also actually help. Don't do a lot of it. You don't want to do that more than once or twice a day, especially if you have high salt intake in your diet. But even just a glass of water, a warm cup of tea, just consuming water is really a great way to trigger healthy responses in the body. The minute we go into a digestive state, eating, drinking, this tells the brain that we're no longer in a fight or flight response. So water, cocooning, going outside. Those are our take-home tools for today. And really play with using these if you're feeling even just slightly stressed, and notice how you feel. There will be a lot of notes about the video in your homework. There will also be a little wrap up about the take-home tool. So I hope you enjoy the session this week, and I'll look forward to connecting with you again next week.